The brush tool and layer masks. Hey there, in this video we'll talk about the brush tool and how we can use it to do some awesome stuff. The brush tool will not be helpful in the way you might expect. Its hotkey is B and it acts like a real life brush so you can paint with it. The colour is set by your foreground colour, which can be adjusted from here. Here's the general way of working. You first need a rasterized layer since it doesn't work on any other type. Then you set your initial colour and you start painting. If you want to use colours that are already in your composition, you have to use the eyedropper tool, but the guys at Adobe made it super easy on us. Just hold down the Alt key and you'll immediately toggle to the eyedropper. Now you can sample any area and this changes your foreground colour. To speed things even more, you can press X to swap these two. That means you can quickly paint with one colour and then switch back to another one. And you can constantly sample other colours. You might think, what if I'm working on a project with 3 or 4 main colours instead of 2? Well, here are your options. First, the standard way is to use the Swatches panel. Open it from Window, Swatches. Now I'll sample a colour and say I want to save it for later. It's easy, simply go over to this area and you'll see your cursor will change. Click once and a new window will appear asking you for a name. Hit OK and that's it. Now you can see the swatch here, and if you click on this tiny icon you'll get many options, like resetting all these swatches, loading some new ones, etc. But if you want to remove one quickly, just hold down the Alt key and a scissor will appear on your cursor. This means you can delete it. That's the very standard approach, but unfortunately it takes up valuable space from this region. And since I don't approve of floating panels randomly on your canvas, here's an alternative. You create a few rectangles and you place them somewhere unobtrusive. You change their colours so they match your colour scheme. And that's it. Now you can quickly do your thing and still have loads of space in the Layers panel. This is also great when you get a colour scheme from the web. You can download or create swatches, but you can also print screen. Now you can paste it into your project and use the Marquee tool to select these 5 colours. Duplicate it with Ctrl-J and delete the rest. Now place it somewhere on your canvas, maybe shrink it down, and you're golden. As you work, you constantly sample from this area that takes up very little of your canvas space. One final thing about the brush tool for its general use is this. You have tons of presets that mimic real-life brushes in this panel. You can use Window Brush Presets if you don't have it. And as you can see, each produces a different result. If you have a tablet, these are even better. Plus, in the Brush tab, you can customize the heck out of it. Basically, you can get as hardcore as you want with it, I mean really in depth. There are courses with hours dedicated to brushes alone, so as you can imagine, it's a vast subject. Enough general talk. Most likely you'll use none of these in your web design projects. We're not painters, and in web design we require pixel-perfect precision. Painting with brushes will rarely come in handy. Instead, we'll use them a lot with layer masks. Don't confuse layer masks with clipping masks. The latter is used with Ctrl-Alt-G to constrain a layer inside the shape of another layer. Let me undo that. Okay, let me explain what a layer mask does. A layer mask is used to hide a part of a layer non-destructively. Here I have a skyscraper, and I'd like to change this boring sky with another one. As you can see, I already have one prepared and it's underneath my building layer. Thing is, I don't want to permanently delete these pixels, that's not the right way to work in Photoshop. So I'll add a layer mask from the bottom of the Layers panel. Now you can see I have this white rectangle next to its thumbnail. Remember that a mask hides something. That's the easiest way to remember it. Here we want to hide this sky. Here's where our brush comes into play. I'll select it and I'll paint over the sky. See what happens? The layer that's underneath is revealed, or otherwise put, we're hiding part of this top layer. Now for a few other important details. Focus on the layer. See how this mask is selected? You can tell by checking out these 4 lines in the edges. That means the mask is active or selected. But if you click on its thumbnail, now the layer is selected. Now if you try to brush over it, you'll see you're using paints and we're messing things up. Notice my foreground and background colours. I have 2 specific ones I sampled earlier. But now if I select the layer mask, they immediately change to black and white. That's because on a layer mask, you can only paint with one of these two. White reveals, black hides. So initially I'm painting with black to cover up my ugly sky, but if I'm careless and I paint over my building, I don't have to undo. Instead I'll use X to flip my colours and use white to paint over it. Now the building is slowly coming back. This is the real power of the brush tool. To control how big your brush is, you can use your square bracket keys on your keyboard. The left one shrinks your brush, while the right one enlarges it. You can do the same from the brush panel we talked about earlier. You'll use one of these two brushes, definitely a round one, but sometimes you may want a hard edge, while other times a softer one does the trick better. You can adjust that with the hardness slider. If it's 0% hard, you'll end up with a smooth, feathered transition. If you crank it up to 100%, you'll see there's no room for error. It produces a dramatic, abrupt result. Based on your images, you can choose one of the two, or you can go somewhere in between. You can also turn down the opacity of your brush to get an even better result. This takes experience, but as you practice, you'll get better and better. Remember to apply the layer mask to the top layer, not the bottom one. If you want to disable it, you can right-click it and use Disable Layer Mask. You can also delete it or apply your changes permanently. But remember, layer masks are fantastic because they destroy no pixels. It's like an overlay through which you can do all sorts of edits, but if you're not happy, you can also go back and adjust it. And you don't have to rely on the Undo tool or the History panel for that. Layer masks can be used on any layer, even on adjustment layers. These are fantastic. Let me delete the previous one so we have a clean slate. Let's say I want to turn my sky into a weird colour. I'll add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. I'll check Colorize and I'll go to town. Now everything is being affected, but I only want my sky to change. Guess what? Adjustment layers come with a layer mask by default. See this white rectangle? We can get a brush and paint over it. We want the building untouched. And as you can see, it does a great job. Well, I'm being sloppy, but you get the idea. This is the power of layer masks. But say you're sick of seeing sloppy work and you want a perfect result. No problem. Here's what you can do. Delete this layer because we don't need it. Now, let's make a quick selection. We'll talk about this tool in just a little bit. Okay, I have the entire sky selected. Add the adjustment layer, hit Colorize, and there you go. I did that in a few seconds. If you take a few more moments to improve your selection, you can do an even better job. And as always, you can further work on it with the brush tool. One last thing before I go. Maybe you got confused and you wanted the building changed and the sky to remain as is. Not a problem. With the mask selected, hit Ctrl-I. This is the inverse command, and as you'd expect, it flips your mask. And with that, I invite you to perform the same steps I did. The images are attached to this lecture. Use any adjustment layer, try to combine the two photos by removing the sky non-destructively, and remember to have fun. Also, get creative. Browse around, get cool images you can combine, and post the result in the comments section. Let me see what you can do with this newfound knowledge.